Hey guys, this is Anon, and we're going to take a look at the PZ-34, the Tier 5 German medium tank that I feel like a lot of people tend to overlook. Tier 5 is not necessarily for everyone. Some people consider that at kind of a seal clubbing level. For me, it's kind of the breaking point between seal clubbing and wanting to play, because you can find plenty of good players there. And for the ones that do enjoy it, this is a really good tank that has some really great attributes, and I think is a lot of fun to play. So we're going to take a deep look at it. This is also going to be the second one of my videos of taking a good hard look at stats, so we can really compare it to other tanks well. So hopefully you guys like this format, and if so, I will keep it going. Okay, so here we are on Tank Compare, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the PZ-34 versus some other fairly common Tier 5 medium tanks that you're going to see. We'll do it against the Type 3 Chinook, the M4 Sherman, the M7, and the T-34. Pretty good cross-section there to give us a good idea of what to expect. Again, I'm going to keep equipment fairly basic at just vents rammer, something that you're going to run on most tanks, and a full provision setup so you can get kind of a good idea about that. So, right off the bat, always one of the most important values to me is DPM, and that is something that this tank is fairly average on. I think you're going to run into a lot of this tank as a lot of things fairly average and that build up to a really good package, and that's something that is certainly not to be discredited. So penetration is actually going to be on the low side at 110. It has the APCR at 158, which is quite a bit better, I feel like. It's going to get through most tanks without too much problem. Maybe when you're low tier against some tier 6s, it might struggle some, but for the most part, that is going to be more than adequate. 160 alpha is fairly typical for the 75mm guns that you see at tier 5 on the medium tanks, so nothing terribly remarkable there. Shell velocity is a little bit low, but it's pretty in line with everything else. I don't think it's something that's going to be a huge outlier or something you have to super worry about. Gun handling is really only okay with this tank. 2-second aim time is on the long side. .346 dispersion is actually pretty bad. You're going to see some stuff that struggles a little bit more, especially when you look at stuff like the Sherman, but it's certainly manageable. Again, the low tier tanks typically don't have great gun dispersion, so you're going to miss a few shots along those lines. Gun depression at 6 degrees, not super fantastic, but feels very German, so nothing necessarily to write home about. All the others are going to top that, and especially with the Sherman and the Chinook, with some fairly great gun depression numbers. So again, pretty average, nothing that's terrifyingly bad, which is good. The mobility is something we're going to see that starts to look really fantastic on this tank. So we've got 55 kilometers forward, 18 back, and that is pretty great. That's pushing light tank speed. Going to be only bested by the M7 and the T-34. The T-34 is essentially a wash, and the M7 is really kind of a light tank in medium tank close, so not a direct comparison, but obviously much faster than tanks like the Chinook and Sherman. Also has fantastic power to weight ratio, 25.8, which is really great, which means it's going to pick up speed much quicker, have a lot of agility, be able to climb hills, so you can take it in a lot of places that you can't necessarily other tanks, and that's a big advantage for that. It also shows really good terrain resistances. Not necessarily the best all the way around, but considering they aren't bad with having the power to horsepower ratio, that is pretty good. Also pretty good traverses, so you can swing around fairly well. Another nice thing to see here that I don't normally point out is a really solid credit coefficient of 146. That's better than a few premiums, so that's something that's pretty great. But what I really like about this tank is its combination of its mobility with the armor. The whole armor is really solid for tier 5 at 60, 60, 40. You can see it's better than any of the other comparisons I'm using for mediums. The turret isn't quite as strong, but it's got some angles, so it's a little bit troll. But that whole armor at its same tier and lower is going to get a lot of troll bounces, and especially because of the angling on it, it means that you can really kind of highlight. So a combination of speed and armor is what makes this tank to me really kind of special, and especially against maybe not the best of players, it's something you're going to be able to really abuse. Okay, so jumping over to Armor Inspector, I have this set against an M4 Sherman, which is a pretty common tank to run into. So at first glance, obviously, yes, it's a lot of green, stuff that's 100% pens, and that's pretty typical for a tier 5 medium tank. What makes this special is once you start to angle, you can get a lot of troll stuff going on. I mean, this is a full side scraping position, and with a medium tank, that's pretty impressive. So you get those angles and you can pull up to hard cover or buildings, anything along those lines, and just back up enough to kind of get this gun around, and you are looking at tons and tons of auto bounces. That side armor is pretty fantastic, and not something that most tanks that have mobility are going to be able to do. Still, obviously, a lot of other angles, it's going to struggle a little bit. It doesn't have a lot of gun depression, so you're not going to be able to use these tight profiles so much. But that side armor is something that, like I said, is very unique. And then if we switch over and look against lower tier tanks like the Covenanter, tier 4 tank that's really, really common, something you're going to see a lot, and you are almost invincible with that mobility. That's extremely, extremely dangerous. Even if we switch over to APCR, as soon as you start to get some angling, again, you have these great pens, and a lot of people aren't going to switch over that, so you have a lot of kind of troll areas with these tanks. So, like I said, kind of a unique armor profile. It's not something you're going to be able to use all the time, but it's something that most tanks don't have at this tier, and something, like I said, that you can abuse if you're being careful with it. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to some gameplay. So I'm actually going to run on old Dead Rail. This is a little bit older of a replay. I was just kind of holding back until I got around to actually making this video. But I'm going to go ahead and charge right, and right off the bat you can see the fantastic mobility of this tank, and that is one of the main reasons I enjoy it so much. So, gets to top speed so quickly, doesn't care about hills, it pretty much just takes all terrain exactly the same and can fly up. So it's really great as kind of an advanced tank to get to that front line and be able to kind of scout but also deal damage. Also, you can see this is very favorable matchmaking. I am top tier, there's a few tier 4s in here, it's not all 5s, but there's some pretty good tanks on the other side, so nothing that you can definitely necessarily discount. So I pop up to that hill in an aggressive move, not something I'm going to do necessarily as low tier, but with the speed I figured I would beat pretty much anything up there, and the whole idea is just to roll up and spot and see if you can start to pick up where the team is, and that worked pretty much perfectly. So I'm just looking for those easy shots. You can also see where the gun depression on this tank is not fantastic. I had to roll back to be able to get my gun down enough to shoot that T-49. And that's just something that comes with some of these tanks. You can also see that even though I'm shooting with a little bit of distance, that not necessarily fantastic gun handling is still doing a plenty good job. I was able to hit shots pretty easily. So once I realize where their tanks are and that I'm not going to have a lot of opportunity for shots, I go ahead and decide to charge in because I want to get rid of that low health T-49. If he runs away, that camo is extremely dangerous. My team's starting to fall a little bit already. The guys that went Valley didn't hold up super well, and you know, that's pretty typical. So go ahead and move on to the next target of the T-34, and I'm hoping to get some shots into this PZ-4D because that's a dangerous gun and a tank that could use a look on its own. But I run into the Churchill. Even though he has a stock turret, that is still a lot of armor and a lot of hit points, so I want to go ahead and put some shots into him while I can, especially because he is tunneled into another tank. And I can also see where all their tanks are down. I thought I'd be okay not taking a shot because they're all engaged with our Hetzer, but unfortunately they had turned on me a little bit, so I had to go ahead and back out. And so I'm going to go ahead and poke, again, that PZ-4D is a very dangerous gun, and now that I know essentially they know where I am, I can go ahead and set up in that side scraping position just like I was showing in the Armor Inspector, that the side armor is pretty fantastic, and against these lower tier tanks I'd probably be able to bounce if they were able to get a shot in. Instead I could go ahead and get rid of him and turn my attention back towards these other tanks. The T-40 is just the easy target. I want the Churchill dead, but that was a nice easy shot, and so I go ahead and switch to APCR because the pen on this tank is a little bit low, like I was saying, and I want to go ahead and get rid of him. That tank can still be a little bit frustrating. This is also when I realized I'm on my way to 7 kills. So I'm trying to, when I take that bounce off the front, which is fantastic, and why this tank can be so great with that armor profile, I want to go ahead and let my camo reset. And I was just going to let it reset and rush out, but that Luke's is going full YOLO mode, so I want to essentially use him as a spotter. And actually he does a great job with it. That is a fast tank, and against a Hetzer's going to really struggle to hit him. So when the Hetzer gets turned, I go ahead and move out so I can try and get an easier shot into that side and go ahead and do it. And I get a little antsy. I want 7, and now I'm going to have a fight for it, so I dive off a steeper part of the cliff than I really realized was there. But but it's just in my anxiety, because anytime you have a chance at 7, that's something special, and you've got to go ahead and give yourself the best shot for it. So load the HE, because I know it's a toaster. I know he's probably hiding in this back corner if he's not AFK, and I'm going to be a little bit choosier about the shots here, because I know most teammates don't recognize when someone else has a chance at this, and they just go for the kill themselves, which is neither right or wrong. It just is what it is. So when he goes ahead and rush in, I go ahead and clutch up the shot a little bit, because I want to at least give myself a chance at it. Hoping for a shoot and ram to get the kill, which I do, and it was a good choice because the Luke's is firing at the end, going for the kill. So either way, it's nice to be able to do that, and I feel like this game really shows a lot of what I've been talking about, the attributes of this tank, where it's got some armor, but that mobility is fantastic, and the combination is something that's pretty rare in Blitz, and that you can really use and do a good job with if you're careful about it. Okay, so one more battle here on Mirage, again with pretty good matchmaking. These are just the battles that kind of made the most sense for it. So I almost always, especially in a medium, want to go ahead and spot in the center anyway, but because my entire team is going to the fall side, I'm going to come up and play it a little bit more conservative. Instead of using that bush where sometimes you can be spotted back, I want to play it real slow, because I can basically make a determination of what I want to do next based on what my team sees. If they get back and see a ton of tanks and falls, I'm going to fast flank and go around and get behind them. But since they aren't spotting anything, it means that most, if not all, of the red team is actually out here, which is exactly what I'm seeing. My team's pushed through, and I'm starting to see a lot of spots, so I have to play this pretty conservatively. I can take a few easy shots if I want, but with tanks pushing to the left, I don't want to get flanked and not have essentially an escape. So I'm going to go ahead and back out. Yeah, I take one shot in the process, but now I've essentially determined where the team is, and because of the mobility on the 3-4, I can go ahead and back out and reposition and let my team kind of come up in that center, which isn't necessarily the best move, but again, it's lower tier. You can't necessarily decide what's going to happen there. So they can go ahead and push in there and allow me to start to work on the flank. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Go ahead and reposition. I see the PZ4D over here to the right, so I'm hoping to get a couple shots in him, because that's a really big and dangerous gun, even as a lower tier. Getting a little bit lucky. You can see the large bloom. That's why, in my opinion, this tank isn't really much of a sniper. It likes to be closer in, and that's where it tends to do a better job. I do get some lucky shots in here, and it's like any tank. Of course, if RNG is playing in your favor, you can use it as a sniper and get some effective shots, but to me, this isn't a tank that you necessarily want to depend on that. I think it's designed more to be a little bit closer in. So Toaster gets a nice shot in there and does a lot of damage because I didn't see him, but I'm going to go ahead and take the Hail Mary shot and get it, which is pretty awesome that it went through the sliver of that rail, but he was going to be really pesky in that location, so I'm glad and pretty fortunate that that went through. So again, they're pushing really hard up through the center because that's where a lot of my team ended up, so I'm just going to stay on this flank. I'm pretty sure the center is going to fall, so I don't want to rush in too far and be out of position when that happens. Instead, I'm going to take the easy shots and go ahead and just start whittling down these hit points as best as I can, focus on the tanks that are lowest health or whatever's right in front of me. Once the M3 Lee falls, I can go ahead and again start working on this flank, kind of trying to get behind this Chi Nu some, just again to be able to start pushing it. And hopefully in this situation, I'm always hoping I can turn at least one gun away from the rest of my team. I don't necessarily want all of them to turn and face me, because then I'll have to relocate. But by turning a gun here and there, it makes a big difference to try and keep a few more of them alive. I can also see again the bad gun depression that this tank has, but able to turn sideways and use this hill to get a little artificial gun depression going, and that works really nicely. Aiming in for the last shot, and he's actually able to poke the top of my cupola, which is a really good shot, and now has put me pretty much a one shot for the T1 Heavy that's alive, so I have to be careful with that. Reasons I also kind of prefer to get rid of this Covenanter, because if I accidentally gave him my side, he'd be able to one-clip me, which is really dangerous. And so you have to be careful with that. But luckily he's kind of rolling out out and giving exactly what you want. Give that nice easy side shot. Now we can go ahead and be in that 1 versus 2 situation. The T1 Heavy really has a fantastic gun, so it's not something you want to, I guess, discredit. It's not necessarily accurate, but it's got some good alpha, and so it could easily take a tank out here in endgame. So I'm going to go ahead and relocate, switch to the APCR just so I'm not really messing around with that heavy armor. You could saw the hit scan when I had AP on his mantlet before. It was a kind of a 50-50 roll, so I'm not really interested in that. Hopefully I can catch his side, but either way, his gun handling is not enough to keep up. So, again, hopefully enjoy this tank a little bit. It's a little bit different. I think it's a fun combination, so hopefully this video helps and you're still liking kind of this new format. Yeah, take care, guys, and plenty more coming.